For people who don't know, Quackle is a program where you can analyze positions. One thing it does is you can run a sim, meaning that the computer will take the position you're in and look at different plays and play it out going forward many, many times, up to hundreds or even thousands of times. And it'll give you a value on which play did best as it was playing against itself. I believe Josh has a Quackle command, so I will be adding that as well. Hello, Elderword. Welcome to the chat. So, okay, we got Josh on the left like we wanted to. He's close to a bingo, but not going to quite have one with that rack by my initial glance. Quackle does confirm it. Elderword, too bad you weren't here earlier. Sid was playing, and he's perhaps the best defensive player in North America, at least since his mentor David Gibson passed. And I know how you like to play defensively, so hopefully you'll get to catch some of Sid's games later in the stream. Churro also, I would say, is a pretty defensive player. When you're at a word deficit, it is a good way to go. Josh is going to play the first play upside down and open vertically as he enjoys. Yeah, you should go watch the videos on demand. Most of round one featured Sid versus Josh because they plan to show more of Noah and Jackson's action later. However, that match ended earlier than expected. Noah had a good play for the cue, and so dumps it quite quickly to play Feek. I think all top players would have found that same play just as quickly as he did and have played it. Um, Josh has intoner on his rack, or tenorine to the G. That'll triple. Oh, tenorine is not a word, so don't listen to me. I really thought it was. Ringtone and nitrogen. Intoner, Oturnian is also an anagram of that. Even though I made the mistake of thinking tenorine is a word, I don't think Josh will make that mistake, and certainly Noah will know it's not good. I could have sworn there was a third in that set, but there is not. So Josh will take his time. He is a methodical player. He does have 20 minutes of clock, which is 5 minutes shorter than our normal tournament of, he's going to go with nitrogen. Okay. It does give back an S hook at the back, but otherwise it's fairly defensive. And with the first bingo of the game down, Josh does take a lead, 82 to 34. Noah does not alphabetize his tiles. He gives away very little. When you're sitting across from him, he remains quite flat at the table, which I think is a great way to be. It's hard to get a tell on Noah. I think the other players are a lot more expressive around the board. He's considering different options here. The highest scoring play, as found by Quackle, would be the word W-A-T-A-P, I believe pronounced Watop, but it is going to hang an A in a spot where he's not going to play it. So Cowpat would also score 28, and that definitely looks like the right play to me. I think we all know what a cowpat is. Perhaps you've stepped in one before. Hope not. Josh has a very promising rack. Will he be able to find a bingo here? I don't see one off first glance, but he's going to really have to take time. Oh, Matthew Tunnicliffe has entered the chat and sees a very exciting extension to nitrogen of dinitrogen. It's not showing up as one of Quackle's plays, so it might not be good in this dictionary. It appears not to be. Perhaps it is good in CSW, which I believe Matthew has switched to lately. Let's put the define command in and find out. Yeah, it is only good in Collins. A very plausible word. You could see that come down. Josh loves extensions. I think Josh and Jackson probably play more extensions than virtually anyone. Um, he'll be looking through the E, seeing a word like remailed, but it won't fit. The N looks very promising, the T, the I. He's probably going to take a lot of time on this turn. Um, it's very difficult when you're so close to a bingo. You really want to make sure you've done your due diligence. If he wants to go for the highest scoring play, and this is a fun one, of Medii, Medii, what makes it hard to find is that you'll need to see the QI and then end in II. That's not the sort of overlap that people would normally look for. You could also play radii. Yes, Elderwood, to answer your question, Josh has organized this tournament. Jackson is the director of record, but originally, actually, I should be clear, uh, Joey Krafchick had arranged this tournament. He had to drop out when he couldn't make the trip. Josh has been doing all of the technical side of things, I would say, the majority of the work, especially in the past week or two. Even when I was there last weekend, he was already doing a lot to get it done. During our lunch break, he spent a good hour using a certain word that starts with F and ends with K. I'm sure you'll all know that it was the word fire truck and nothing bad, but he did repeat that on multiple occasions. Thankfully, the stream wasn't live. He has set up the word media, medial, on his rack. He's going to keep flipping here. Yeah, that's forked up, Todovsky. I hope that wasn't too spoon. I will run out of puns soon, so hopefully Josh makes a play. But like I said, I think this is one of those turns where he's really going to use a lot of clock. Josh does like to say wow. I did catch Joey having a repeated phrase in this morning's games, but I already forget what it was, so I guess it couldn't have been too bad. I feel like I'm saying a lot, so maybe you want to track that. Welcome, Lola. She has that lovely first badge next to her name, which, what does that mean? It means she's the founder of the channel. Oh, and look at that. Josh is going to find the beautiful play of Medii. Leaving LAR, a nice bingo leave. Noah is playing very quickly, AYE, I, an assenting vote. We didn't really have time to analyze that play, but Noah had all of Josh's clock to do so. Josh would like an S for a word that I believe is still allowed of arsehole. Is earhole a word? I think for some reason it might be. No, earlap. Earhole is good, yeah, but it does not fit as far as I can tell. Yeah, I did remember seeing earhole, but I was wondering if I was making things up. Another weird one is ear laps. I find I tend to miss those very high probability words starting with ear. He has a fun command here. It starts with ear and the whole list. No, yeah, there it is. If he can play the EE Collins, yes. All four of these players are predominantly NWL players. They all played a touch of CSW, more than me for sure, but this is their familiar dictionary. Sid recently played Collins tournaments for the first time. He knew the twos, he didn't know the threes, but did manage to win one of these tournaments, which is very impressive and showing the strength of these NWL competitors. These are definitely four of the top people in North America, especially in this dictionary where they're comfortable. Josh has picked up how and will play it over Cowpat. I think that would be the logical play. Noah has duplicate R's, duplicate A's. Go along with bit. So he's not going to have a high scoring play here, confirmed by Quackle. I'll put that command for Quackle into the chat in case people want to learn more about it. Um, so this, again, is going to be the sort of turn where I would expect the player to take a lot of time because a lot of the plays are going to be quite similar in value. So Noah is behind. He's going to want to keep the board open. That nitrogen play really kept things sort of flat. You can bingo down from the T or the R beneath the E of nitrogen towards the right or hooking an S. So it's not closed, but neither player has an S or a blank at the moment, which means there are 6 to come. We might see some late game fireworks. Um, Noah has split up 3 tiles to the left, A, B, R. They could form a word like arb or bra. Both would score 16 points. Um, but they would, yeah, it would open the triple lane with the B there. So he is going to be aggressive there. He is down. Um, it's not the easiest triple to hit, but it is dangerous. We can see from Josh's rack that Noah won't get hit too hard in that spot because Josh's rack isn't quite where it wants to be. He has that U, the ugliest of the vowels, and he has duplicate L's and E's. In Scrabble, we don't want duplicates. The duplicate blanks can be okay, or S or even E, but generally you don't want them. He's going to play bullet. Oh, or buller. Okay, I think that is valid. Oh, actually, it is not. I was thinking maybe it was buller and bullist, but I think Noah is a strong enough player here that you would expect to see this challenge come down. Matthew's telling us it's CSW, so perhaps Noah, who started to play a few more CSW games, will know this. Yeah, Josh is bullying him. Um, the longer I look at it, the uglier it gets. Of course, knowing it's not good really makes that easy. Josh drew 5 replacement tiles of B, N, N, and I, so if he does lose his turn here, he'll have to put those tiles back in the bag, but throwing back 3 N's would not be as bad as some other draws would be. The challenge does come. This word will come off the board. Um, Noah's going to stand up to get a better look at the challenge computer just to make sure. So Elderwood was wondering if maybe he played braid into the ID on the board. That was also possible. It would give a lot less back. By my math, it would score 3 fewer points. So definitely something to consider. Something I definitely would have considered. So Noah wins this challenge. Let me make sure I do it properly in Quackle here. It forms an unacceptable word, but it is challenged off the board. We will commit that. So going back to Noah, now that he's won the challenge, it becomes his turn. If the N was in a different spot, he'd be looking at a word like starting. He does have the advantage of knowing 5 of Josh's tiles, and he also knows that Josh almost certainly doesn't have a triple because if he did, he would have already played it. If he wants to go from the B down to the triple, the only word available would be Brits with 2 T's, leaving AG. I don't know if he's going to want to burn the blank for that. Just something like Gib, leaving a nice bingo lane, a nice bingo leave to get him back in the game is probably more advised. And that is what he will play. Quackle, being very smart, remembers Josh's rack already. Will he play something like Hull here, leaving ERE? That would be my first thought. The thing with Hull is it gives hooks back, like the O, hello. Noah has drawn the blank. I thought I saw the slightest smile creep out. He's looking down at his sheet for a while, not at the board, but he will look up to see Hull be played. That looks perfectly reasonable. So the obvious word in that rack would be targets. I guess you could play it to form the word shoe. There is that one S hook at the top of the board above ho to shoe. We call that a hook by being able to put an S there. That would be a front hook because the letter goes at the front of the word, whereas the back hook would be like the letter O I said to the word hello. And if hello gets played, then an A could go for helloa. If you're not familiar with these words, that's okay. These are some of the very top players in North America. They've done a lot of word study through different programs like Aerolith and Ziziva. I hope Josh has commands for those. I will throw them into the chat if you want to learn some more words. I myself played daily for well over a decade before I ever studied words. So that by the time I did study words, I had a really good feel for the game. And there's targets coming down. Quackle is saying it was the only bingo available, so there was really nothing else to consider. Yes, true. I did play for a long time. I played on ISC on multiple accounts. I played on games.com, Lexilus, Scrabulous on my phone against the Scrabble app. I played on Scrabble Go. I've played on Woogles, which is my favorite, so I'm definitely going to link that one. Find me on Woogles as this guy. If my camera was on, you would see two thumbs pointing towards me as I say this guy. And thank you, Lola. I'm glad you liked the commentary. Yeah, Lexilus was different. If I remember, that was the one that let you have 8 tiles, and I think maybe they had different scoring options and stuff. Also, people love to call you a cheater on sites like that. One of the reasons I started playing tournaments is because I was finding it harder and harder to get a high quality game because people were very distrusting of me being a good player without having a live record to prove it. Yeah, Elderwood is confirming that Lexilus was an 8-tile game and you would get a bonus for playing 7 tiles of 40 points or 50 points for 8 tiles. Josh has drawn pretty close to a bingo here. He's gonna have to really decide what he wants to do here. He's down about a turn. So even though he's down points, it is his turn. So it makes the game almost even. High level players will score upwards of 35 points a turn here in NWL, especially in the middle of the game. Later in the game, that value will go down. However, because it's his turn, that gives him an advantage, but not the full advantage of the 35 points because it is possible that Noah will have the same number of turns as he will the rest of the game. At the moment, but Josh could also have one more turn. He'll play Rodeo, get rid of 5 tiles, keep the ES, the Great Bingo Leave, and the S will play in a couple spots on the right side of the board. I imagine Noah will look to close that if he can. Noah only has the A as vowels, and he has 2 of them, and he's already found the play once again. I believe I said earlier Noah is probably the fastest player in this field, and he's really showing it, having found his plays on Josh's clock. Josh is down to 8.5 minutes. He's going to want to save time for the end game. He has drawn induces, unsliced I'm seeing. Maybe in the chat you're seeing something else. Josh looks like he's writing out the alphagram perhaps. Maybe he's just doing his tracking. So yeah, induced and accused. Anything else in that set? They're not going to play, but through the L includes unsliced and there is a third, nuclides, I believe. So at this point, he's just going to have to decide which of the bingos he's going to play, assuming he finds all 3 of them. I'd probably look to play unsliced myself for a couple reasons. One being that it scores 1 more point. Another reason being it puts the D out in space, which is probably less likely to get bingo 2 than the S. And also it hangs the C in front of the multiplier score, which is very defensive because you can't put any tile in front of the C. The C and the V being the two tiles in NWL that don't have any two-letter words with those tiles in them. You can't put anything before or after the C or V to form a two-letter word. Josh is gonna go with nuclides, I believe. No, includes, okay, that also looks okay. It's probably a touch worse for the reasons I mentioned, but it's hardly a big problem. He might not have been unsure of unsliced, he might not have seen it, and either way, with 6 minutes and 44 seconds left, I think it's more important to get a bingo down than it is to really start analyzing these really small, minute differences, because they're better in theory, but based on what Noah has, even if you pick the better option, it could end up being worse for you. Yeah, Elderwood, I do think that is what his rack is. That's what I've entered it here in Quackle. So not only am I doing the commentary, I'm also trying to keep up with chat and entering into Quackle so we can get some analyses. I haven't run a sim yet, but hopefully at some point I will. Is this the bronze playoff? I'm not quite sure what you're asking by that. This is round 2, so we're not at the playoff stage. We are playing 3 rounds. Whoever's won the most rounds, the top 2 players, will then go on to the finals for the chance at winning the big $1,200 prize. And I think he might, yeah, he's going to play freeze here. A very odd spelling of the word freeze. We'll get the definition in the chat in a second. It kills that S lane. It does leave a lane below the F if the word would end in A or E, or even AE. I will define freeze for you. Put a decorative band on the top edge of a wall. Okay. There's another word for that, like crown molding, I think is what I've known it to be. I remember a friend telling me that her coworker always complained that she was able to travel, whereas this coworker wasn't, but the coworker was spending all of her money on upgrading the crown molding in her house. So priorities, people. If you want to travel, you might not have a nice strip of plaster on your walls. While I was going off on my aside, Josh scores 51 big points with G's. And based on Noah's ugly rack, I don't think he's going to be able to get down to that triple word score, which means that Josh might be able to on his next turn with a play like James or Jones. Noah has one of the ugliest racks we've seen him with yet. It's at the same time, it's not too far away from a bingo. If you could get rid of the duplicate I and the V, perhaps the U as well. Looking around the board, ZD is an option, the pasta ZITI. However, that would hang a very dangerous S lane. He could just drop the, ooh, I don't know, maybe drop, this is definitely a tough turn. Anything he can do is giving so much back, and his options of just fishing off a couple tiles aren't very clear here. Like I was saying, the V and the I are sort of hurting the rack here, but you're not going to want to play big for 7. He is down 40, and you want to keep scoring as much as possible. There is the option of Vertu, VERTU, leaving IIN. Again, that would set up the S hook. I'm leaning myself towards ZD. Let's try and think if any of Josh's recent plays would have indicated what he has, and I would say no, because 2 turns ago he bingoed with includes, and then last turn he scored 51 points with G's, so he might have had another S. It wouldn't have really mattered. He was going to play that, unless there was somewhere where he could have played the word Jesse, Jesse, but probably not. And so Noah's not going to really be able to decide if Josh might have an S. he doesn't have one. Looking at the tile pool, there's just one unseen as well as one blank unseen, and there's 21 tiles unseen, so 2 out of 21 would be about 1 in 10, and Josh has 7 tiles, so it's probably a bit less likely than not that Josh has an S, but very possible. Perhaps he's doing the calculations in his head right now. I know when I was in Montreal with these guys last weekend, uh, I mentioned to Noah how I wasn't so good at calculating such probabilities, and he started to teach me by putting out some very complicated formulas. Here he'll play Vane, which I didn't consider because I've just been talking instead of really looking for plays, and that looks very smart, leaving URTI, probably the most balanced leave he was able to come up with there. And it didn't leave as dangerous of an S hook as if he had played ZD, although it will score a lot fewer. Josh did have the S, and like I said earlier, he can get down from the J to the triple. I think a play like Jones is probably standard. The O being the worst of those vowels, and that is what he'll play. I would have played the same. Quite quickly, we're back to Noah's turn. So he left, was it ATRU and drew WID, I believe. So it's pretty balanced in the sense of 4 consonants to 3 vowels, which is a good frame of reference of what you kind of want to keep on most turns. However, that UW combination we discussed earlier has appeared, and it's looking pretty ugly. Always play would. That's right. I would do that myself, assuming that is what would means. I know it doesn't take an S. It could be played beneath nitrogen, the Ni in nitrogen. If he wants to play long, he could play unitard, perhaps. That would hit the double word score. It would let him flip a lot of tiles for the chance at hitting that blank that remains unseen to him. When I say playing long, what I mean is instead of playing off 1, 2, or even 3 tiles, such as the play Chris suggested of Wud, you play more tiles, 4, 5, or 6 tiles, in the chance of flipping over more tiles and maybe giving yourself that tile you really need to win. In this situation, I think Noah knows if he doesn't get the blank, he's really unlikely to win because that means Josh will have the blank and probably be able to bingo himself, and Noah will not be able to. The thing about playing Wud there is it does take out 3 bingo lanes, the N, the I, and the T of nitrogen, which would not be what Noah is looking to do here at all. The W fits nicely above adds for WADs, but he won't be able to go across, so that's not going to be an option. He has his hands over his head. He's realizing the situation he's in. He's doing the tracking, so he knows that there's a blank unseen and that he doesn't have it. Josh has set up the blank in front of AKE boy. Is there any word that fits that pattern or with one of the floaters on the board? Not that I see, but perhaps one of the really good anagrammers in the chat does. Fake boy, yeah, that would be a fake play from a fake boy. Cake boy, wake boy, Jake boy. Binax sees that if unitard comes down, there would be a big response. Perhaps through the R. I haven't found it yet, doesn't mean it's not there. But yeah, what would you people do if you had Noah's rack here, being down 62 points? He is going to just play off the AW, I mean. R or D for keyboard. Are they in the right spot for keyboard though, where unitard was going to come down? So Noah scoring 13 points there is Not nearly enough for his comeback bids. Um, Josh. Oh, R for Rockabye. Well, Rockabye will fit. Down from the R in nitrogen, he could play it. The C will end up on the multiplier, and the C is the blank, so it won't really be worth much. The other big consideration is he'll be hanging in that E in the triple lane. Now, in this sort of score, he has the lead, he has the blank. I don't think he's going to want to risk hanging the most dangerous letter, the E, in the triple lane, because should Noah have a response, it would be ×9. Now, Josh can do the tracking and see if it's likely to have a play come down. Looking at the pool, it looks like DEILMOPRTTUV, so probably not looking like there would be a triple, but if he is going to play Rockabye, he'd want to at least think it through. Instead, he's just going to close things up with Yoke and Vaney. That looks perfectly reasonable, and there's just no reason to play Rockabye there. With BE8 blank, I don't see a way he's going to be losing this game. And when we look at Noah's rack, we really see why. We've mentioned twice the UW being an ugly combination, but the UV is not much better. Yeah, Binac, you're right. If Unitard came down, Rockabye would have been much safer. And would it have even hit the F in freeze? I believe so by my rough counting. Noah sees the front hook for Opa of Dopa, which is a medicine. Dup and Pate will come down too. Once again, if some of these words aren't familiar to you, that shouldn't be such a surprise. These players have done a lot of word study. Josh, I'm assuming is playing movable here. It doesn't really matter which bingo he decided to go with. Noah has trivet left on his rack. I guess he's going to challenge just because he only has 6 tiles, so the game will be over. I'm going to mark it as a V and end this one. The final score will be 472 to 312. And congratulations to Josh on tying up the set. Right now it's showing zeros next to both players' names, only because Josh hasn't updated it. I can't do that remotely here in Toronto. Hopefully Josh will see it and remember it. If not, I'll try and keep you guys updated. I'm with you for 7 games. We've done 2. Both have been between Josh and Noah. Hopefully at some point we'll get to see what's going on with Jackson and Sid. I'm going to click on the score right now. It looks like it hasn't been updated for Jackson and Sid, so we still don't know what's gone on in the other game. WTF looks at the pattern, wondering if perhaps mowable was a word. Who won this morning? 6 games to 2 was the final in the Jackson over Josh set. Jackson over Noah set, excuse me. And between Josh and Sid, Sid ended up winning 6 games to 4. So Sid and Jackson, who were both the underdogs in their first round matches, came out on top, showing you how evenly these guys are matched. Anyone can win if you draw the tiles, if you make the right plays, and even if you don't make the right plays. Today in one of the games, the clinching game for Sid, he missed a couple bingos, and he tried benzoin with an E on the end, which isn't valid, and it almost cost him, but then he also made a game clinching play by correctly challenging Josh's phony of sistras. Sistra being a plural already, so it doesn't take the S. Sistrum being the singular. The 2 players here are doing a bit of a post-mortem analysis, seeing what could have went differently. Noah's pointing towards the S and G's, perhaps saying it was at that point that the game started to get out of control. It looks like both players played quite solidly. I wasn't seeing mistakes. I don't think we had a missed bingo. It was a bit harder to analyze Noah's play because by the time we got to him, he seemed to already have his play lined up, and all I could do was type it into Quackle. Yeah, Ristras is allowed. I think that really helps sell Sistra, and I wonder if Sid even knew Sistra was good as a six. Sid hasn't done quite as much studying as the other players. Josh, his opponent, would be the other player with weaker word knowledge in this field. Noah would definitely be the strongest with regards to word knowledge, and Jackson a close second. I did mention that Jackson was the underdog, and according to Joey's betting lines, Noah was the favorite. Having played them both a lot, I definitely see why people think Noah was the favorite, but let's not overlook that Jackson went over 2100, uh, which means that he has the highest peak rating out of any of these players. He went well above 2100. A couple of years ago, he went on quite the run. A very dangerous player, can beat anyone. Noah hasn't played as many tournaments, so just comparing them rating to rating might not be fair, but um, because of the round one results, Jackson's current rating had already jumped over Noah's. So to say any of these players are the favorite is really a marginal term. Probably over the course of upwards of, I think, 44 or even 46 games, the better player should come out on top, but not necessarily. Um, Even if Jackson's better than Noah, 6 games to 2 would never be expected of players of such similar ratings. And many people, perhaps myself included, would still say uh, Noah is likely the better player. He definitely is better with the nines and long words like that. Jackson, like Josh, has a really innate sense for creativity. Uh, a lot of people think of Scrabble as a very rote sort of knowledgeable game, but it's very creative, especially when you get towards the pre-end game and the end game when you're trying to set things up. They love their setups. Um, I played against them all quite a lot. Jackson would be my initial mentor in Scrabble. When I first came out to the Toronto scene, he was already living in Toronto, and I thought I was a good player, and then I started playing with Jackson, and I realized how little I knew. He introduced me to Quackle. He introduced me to a lot of strategy on leaves, on turnover, on equity, on variance. Hopefully, we'll get to all these different terms as the day goes on. Um, I'm very indebted to Jackson for all of his help, and I like to think I put in a lot of my own effort to also improve, and I hope you guys do too. I had mentioned earlier how I hadn't studied for quite some time, but um, for like a good 10 years I was playing without any studying. But once I started studying, one thing that really surprised me was how much more fun the game becomes. When you really have a good understanding of what words you can play and what words are options, it really helps analyze positions at a deeper level that you're just not capable of before you know the words. So even though I also had a strategic deficit, um, my word knowledge deficit compounded that. Yes, hello to Ross. Welcome to the chat. And yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, Lola. When you're more creative, when you have more tools, you can be more creative. And even when you're like near the end of the game, there's a couple in the bag and you're trying to look for options. Well, if you don't know all the words, you can't make an informed decision because you don't know what you could possibly be hitting. You can only rely on the words you know of, and the words you know might not even be right. Um, a lot of words that you assume would be in the dictionary just don't show up, and a lot of words that you think can't possibly be a word are there. Um, Churro, yes, you are definitely at a word deficit. First of all, because Norwegian was your first language, although you're clearly fluent in English, hosting multiple streams, both about Scrabble, makeup, and travel. So Churro definitely has a lot to say on a lot of topics, and we love hearing her. She beat me a few games in a row the other day. I had told her at the start of the set I should have gone to sleep, and perhaps I should have taken my own advice, although I don't mind losing to such a quality player. She has great board vision and strategy. Like I was saying, her and Elderword seem to come from the same school of Scrabble, being a bit behind on the word knowledge, but really sharp with their strategic play, and especially from a defensive standpoint. No, it's more than luck, and as we all know, you have to be good to be lucky and lucky to be good. Or as I heard them say on Frasier, luck is the residue of design. So that's a nice quote, and I'm always happy to quote any 90s sitcom. Hopefully I'll get some Seinfeld and Simpsons and other references in here to the chat. This stream seems to be mainly guys in their mid-30s commenting on guys on their mid-20s, so our references might be about a decade earlier. And look at that! Cynical ad gifting a sub to the legend himself, G.I. Joel. So thank you for that donation. And Joel, welcome. We'd always like to hear your thoughts. I'm going to save this game in Quackle because I've been talking instead of doing my bookkeeping. If I can get my mouse to respond, there it goes. Josh, Noah, game 2. Okay, new game here. So Josh will pass on the first turn, so everything's on the left. And then did anyone see what Noah exchanged? I think he had maybe an OA. That's what I'm going to enter it as. I hope I got that right. Yeah, Fresh Prince references are always welcome. Everybody thank Joey, who did such a good job at streaming this morning. Joey likes to direct tournaments and our fantasy football league, in which I am in a dead last place, and I forgot to take out my injured running back at the start of Thursday's games. I didn't see what Josh exchanged. He exchanged 2. Did anyone know what those 2 tiles were? Otherwise, I'm just going to put them as eyes and exchange them. I'm falling really far behind. I'm going to stop talking and start typing. Noah has a fun word here that showed up on Churro's stream once, I remember, and she looked it up only to find that the definition was perhaps not the most appropriate. I believe it was somebody who was participating in an orgy. Yeah, Churro is confirming. If other people want to donate to Josh's channel, he'd be most appreciative. You can't imagine the amount of work he's put in to get this event going. Changing cameras, changing phones. He has put in so much work to give us basically free entertainment, especially during COVID when things weren't open. So a big thank you to Josh for all that and for hosting me for 4 days in Montreal last weekend. Originally, I wanted to play in this tournament once the borders stayed closed and I couldn't drive to Lake George, but the tournament at the time was full, so I messaged Josh and he said, well, why don't you just come hang out? Noah's in town, and I did that. And then when a spot did open up in the tournament, I couldn't commit to taking more time off work so soon. But I am glad I'm able to be here with you on the weekend to commentate. I'm also glad I'm not playing 44 games over 4 days, to be quite honest. That sounds quite brain melting. Some people find tournaments a lot of fun. I always found they felt more like an exam. But during COVID, I've just played so much gravel and I'm dying to play a tournament. So hopefully an NWL tournament will be in my region soon. Josh has Axe set up on his rack. Chris is asking if there are any candidate plays, and instead of rambling, I should be focusing on what he could potentially do. He could play Axe beneath the OR of Orgias. That might be his first thought. It would leave GENS. We know Josh doesn't want to leave the G. The problem is none of his good plays use the G unless he wanted to play Sexing, and I don't think he's going to waste the X. There would be the S for that. There would be no reason to. So to me, Axe is looking reasonable, but he might also be thinking about setting up the X if he can. It's always a good thought. Quickly looking over to Noah's rack, we'll see that he's drawn the first blank of the game. So being up 70 and having the blank is going to put him in a very commanding position, even if he only has one vowel to go with that rack. axe is coming down, so as expected. It's now 70 to 23. And Noah now has to look to see if he has a bingo. With the JHM combination, almost certainly not. Quackle is confirming he doesn't, but there is a double-double through the I. A double-double meaning it hits both double word scores, and that means the play would be ×4. I'm not going to tell you guys what it is yet, so you have a chance to look for it. It is a common word, but it's not one that would come up often because it is low probability. I'm sure Joel's already found it. It looks like Noah has found it, and let's see what hijinks he gets up to. There it is. A beautiful find by Noah, to no one's surprise. And that'll score 64 points. No problem burning your blank if you're going to score 64. Fortunately for Josh, he looks to have Jinners as a 7. Does he have anything else from the T maybe? Rentings? Through the I, resonating would definitely be a word. I'm not sure on rentings. Should be a word, but I don't remember seeing it. Stern, I think, is only an adjective. Kernings. Through the blank. Okay, that would be possible. A kerning, I believe, is like when the letters are looking close together when they're typed. Yeah, there's nothing in that rentings rack. You would think rentings would be like more of a noun, but Ziziba, which I've just opened here, is showing it as a verb. So either way, Jinners would look like the highest scoring bingo, so I do expect Josh to see it. It's a very high probability word, and one I'm quite confident he'll know. I'm going to define kernings for you guys because I do enjoy that word. Yeah, it is the adjustment of adjoining typeset letters. Sometimes with certain fonts, some letters will come together and almost look like a totally different letter when they're placed next to each other. So you got to be careful with which font you pick. Jinners comes down. There is a front hook to that one. We were talking about hooks earlier. That's a letter that can go before. And that hook is sitting on Noah's rack. It's the A, Jinners. I'll put a define in here because I don't know what it means. I know it's an anagram of like earnings and other words like that. An opponent of change, okay? I don't even know what Jinners means. There are a lot of strange words in this game. Oh, Jinners one or Jins cotton. So that is what I would have thought. Noah could play Matzo here, M-A-T-Z-O. And yeah, that is what he will play. Oops. I misentered it into Quackle, so let me just fix that quickly. Okay. Ooh. Josh drew the Q, duplicate O's, B, R, T, D as his other consonants. Not exactly the sort of rack he was hoping for here, especially now as he's down 102. So he's going to have to decide if he wants to play long, as we discussed, maybe playing 5 tiles. The word brood would be an obvious choice, but it's going to start killing lanes, which he doesn't want to do here. He could dump QI for 11, but that's not going to lead to good plays too often next turn. He should take time to consider if there would be anything he could draw into next turn, but I'm not really seeing it. If you're keeping the Q, you want to play more tiles than not for the chance of drawing an O, and Brood will come down. It does sort of obstruct that I and that N of a Jinners, which is what I was saying, but I do think it's the right move. I think playing QI is not going to lead into anything he wants to do. Brood might still hurt, but sometimes in Scrabble you have to make the best of a bad situation. Noah has a comfortable bingo lead here of 72 points, so that's a pretty average score for a bingo, especially if you can get a double word score involved. He's close to things like pinwheel, but doesn't quite have them. He has a duplicate N here. And so he's going to have a difficult decision. I see Paul, P-A-W-L. I think it means like a pallbearer, and that could form with who and lid. That would be my first thought. One thing to consider on this board is the hooks to Matza. We do have a fun hook command. I think. Maybe it's just hook. No. Oh. Okay, well, Paul did come down. Matzo, you could definitely put a T or an S. You can put the H in some spellings, but with the O, yeah, you can put it as well. So there are three options there. Josh has one of them being the T, but he's going to play QI very quickly. QI is the most commonly played word in Scrabble, and for good reason. The Q is a very awkward tile to play, and so when you can dump it, you typically will choose to, and he's done so with leaving a very nice bingo-friendly rack. Noah is going to like this rack as it's a natural 7, but does he have anywhere to play that word of alanine? And if not, is there an 8 that he can play? I haven't clicked Quackle yet. I've been relying on it a bit much. Want to do a bit of my own analysis. I'm not seeing it, and because Noah's so fast, you like to think he would have found it right away, although it's not a guarantee. Josh has drawn the Y, which would fit nicely beneath ox for oxy. But Noah continues to sit here on what Joey was calling a no-go earlier today. I like to think of them as homeless bingos. There are, I guess, different terms that different players use. Either way, it's frustrating, although that 70-point or so lead takes away a lot of the burn. If he can't bingo, he can play down from the Z, which I continue to say Z over Z, first of all, because I'm Canadian, so that's the word that comes naturally to me. Second of all, this event's hosted in Montreal, so why not use the local term? He's going to play Geen, leaving nail. He also could have played Zanana down from the Z, but I think that would have not shaped the board in the direction he was looking. And Josh, very quickly, with a nice extension to oxytone. So I was looking at oxy about going across. I didn't look at his rack very long, but that's a hard one to find. I think that would be perhaps the play of the game so far. But look at this. Once again, Noah is staring at a bingo, and those are bingo tiles, so I won't ruin the fun for anyone. See if people can give some options of what they see, assuming there is anything. There are certainly 7s, like Raleen, in that rack. Well, I'm glad to hear it, Cynical Ad, and welcome from across the pond. I'm not sure what time it is there, but I'm glad you're spending your Saturday, I hope it's Saturday, with us. Josh, if an S gets hung, could play televise, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. The word of Geen does take an S. There are a lot of words that look like that for some reason don't, so perhaps Noah played it wondering if Josh wouldn't be sure. I think he'll know it takes an S. It also does kill the Matza hooks we were talking about earlier. Not completely, but mostly. I guess you could see a word starting in TS, like czar, an alternate spelling of the more common TZAR. But if Noah can't find a bingo, he could look to just take out that big scoring spot on the left of oxytone, because if Josh were to have perhaps the M or the P or the W or the Y left in the bag, or the G. They could all hit pretty big from the O down to the triple word score, because it would be times 2 times 3 and then times 2 again. So times 8, I believe, by my math. And yeah, he's going to do just that, finding liar. There was a 9-letter bingo through the T and the S. We see it spelled more often with one L, but tonsillar with 2 L's would have also been acceptable. But the play of liar is very effective in doing what he wants to get done, which is killing that S hook below oxytone, and oxytone does take an S, some of those tone words do not. And it also gets rid of that scoring spot. And Noah has set up his own last name pluralized on his rack. Nice to see some cheekiness out of Noah in the middle of a very competitive match. So I said very quickly on the last track he surely had a bingo. I would think he has one here, but because it's Josh's turn, let's keep our attention focused there. He's going to want to get rid of at least one of the E's and the V. He could play something just like love, dropping the VE and setting up a new lane. He could play Eve down parallel to hijinks, but that looks a bit inferior to love. IN coming down from liar and oxytone isn't going to help Josh here. I mean, unless he plays something like invite or invitee, but it is something to keep in mind going forward. We were talking about playing short versus playing long. I think Josh is going to want to play shorter here, stay close towards bingoing, because his rack is close, and he's going to play Niev. I think part of the reason he chose that word is because of the V, Noah's not going to be able to just take out that spot instantly. You can't overlap the V, we already mentioned that. And so for that reason, one of the 2 E's is likely to be available to Josh, or if Noah plays through the V, then it'll probably go down low enough that Josh can bingo down from the bottom letter of the V word. So I hadn't looked over there, but I do see a lot of reasoning as to why he might have chosen that word. Doesn't score a ton, but none of his options were really going to score much. Going over to the Walton side of the board. Oh, this is fun. There are extensions from matzah. Matzah is a bread that doesn't rise, but you can expand it with a totally different word. 2 people see it. There is no bingo available, but he does have an extension worth 57. He already burned his blank once without bingoing. He could do so again. And Matsoon has nothing to do with matzah. It's a yogurt made from fermented milk. And Noah's going to continue to play defense, taking out that IN front hook, making that S of hijinks a bit harder to hit. We did see how tonsillar could have fit there earlier, and also just scoring while leaving ALS blank with his lead is very safe. Josh, however, has drawn into elective, and he will elect to play that as quickly as he can, for good reason. And that'll give him a slight leave after elective comes down. So it was looking like Noah was in a lot of control, and with this bingo looking rack, again, you would still think he's in control. But the game is far from over. Even if he gets a bingo down, and I'm not seeing one, I don't see a 7 there for sure, but could be hidden. If he doesn't have a bingo, he probably could just play fouls using the multiplier next to the E, the bottom E in elective. If you're new to the game, the multiplier squares are where you're going to get most of your points from. So one of the first things you want to do is look for multiplier squares, the colored squares that are next to vowels. Because if they're next to vowels, you can normally put a high scoring consonant like his F on that tile, and then it's already going to be worth times 6 if he can make a play going down, times 3 to the left and times 3 going down. And if he can hit the double word score, then the times 3 will be multiplied by 2 going down for times 6, and then times 3 to the left. So the F alone times 9 is worth 36 points. The other option is playing something through the I in elective. Now, one nice thing about Josh's bingo from his perspective is that it opened up 2 big scoring spots, and the V is going to block Noah from taking out both. Once again, we're seeing how defensive that V can be. Not that Josh really planned this out. When you have a bingo, you just sort of play it. I guess he could have played elective from a different spot, but he did choose quite correctly the right positioning. So even if Noah gets a big play with fouls, Josh will have a chance to respond with his own big play through the I in elective. Looking over to the pool, however, the J, Q, X, and Z are all gone. So I wouldn't see a huge play coming, but if he does play EF, then Josh can parallel hook that. So EF takes a back F, it takes a back T, and it takes a back S. And then Josh could play a word going down, ending in whatever word he were to form with EF. Everything suddenly got awfully blurry for me. I hope it's just me. If anyone else's stream went really blurry, let me know. Otherwise, perhaps my internet is just buffering for a second. Noah's reaching out. He is playing fouls. I can just make out the tiles through the blur. It's gotten really blurry though. I'm gonna have to try and refresh the page. Bear with me, please. Okay, since refreshing the page, it's looking fine again. Thank you for checking that, Lola. Maybe I shouldn't be in Chrome. Josh was mentioning how he likes to stream in Opera. Also, they have a VPN to protect your privacy, or at least they claim to. Yeah, the Quackle part is not going to be clear just because he had to really zoom in to show the score. The only other way would be the commentator, myself, to be constantly telling you the score. Kenji was trying to do that on the test run, but kept forgetting. So what they've done is really zoomed into the score on the Quackle page, and because it's zoomed in so intensely, there's just not enough pixels left to make it clear. But yeah, it is sufficient. You can make it out. You can see the clocks. I'm glad it's correcting itself for you, Bonehead. Bonehead hasn't played a tournament in about 10 years, but he has played a lot of Scrabble, so if you're looking for a competitive NWL game, look for him on Woogles. Great competitor, and he'll definitely talk your ear off, just like I will, and a lot of people enjoy that. It can be a social game as much as anything else. So Josh can look at a play like Yurd, using that I there. I'm going to put some sample plays up on Quackle. Are they showing for you? Yeah, Dreamy you could see as an option. Yurd was my first thought. Myri. So when you're playing these different plays, what you want to really consider is what you're scoring and what you're leaving. That would be calculating your equity. Yurd would leave AEMU, whereas Myri would leave ADEU, both scoring the same amount. So the difference being if you wanted to leave the D or the M there. Dreamy is playing long, turning over more tiles, giving him a chance to draw that blank, which we know is on Noah's rack, but Josh doesn't know unless Noah inadvertently showed the tile while drawing, which can happen, but I don't think it did. That both players have 8 minutes left. Josh is going to go long here with Dreamy. That is his style. He's the most open of these 4 players. And with Dreamy, he's going to score 39 points, which was his highest scoring play available. Noah continues to have the blank. For once, he has a rack that doesn't look like it would bingo instantly. too many consonants, the duplicate T's and the B and the F. He could play something like fiat through that I. He could play something like batty to the Y. I don't think he can, or he could also make a word for me deft. Deft being like somebody who's capable. So he definitely has his options here. I always want to hear what chat is thinking. Um, he wants to be able to make sure that whatever he plays is going to let him have a bingo lane going forward because he knows he's going to have the blank and he's going to want to make sure he's going to have a spot to use it. So maybe fiat ending in the T would let him finish a word with EST. Yeah, this game has gone a bit faster than most Elder Word, although both players are under 8 minutes, so I wouldn't say it's been too fast. They're gonna start feeling the time crunch, especially if the score stays close. Um, Noah's probably already identified the sort of plays I've discussed. Now he has to decide which one makes the shape of the board he wants while also not leaving a big spot for Josh to hit. Yeah, he can't leave that eye open with the K unseen, other tiles like that. So fiat is what I was thinking, and it's always good to be on the same page as Noah with his strong analytical skills. When I was in Montreal, we played a few games of hand and brain, which is where one player says the first letter of the word to be formed, and the other player has to then form a word starting with that letter. So I was on Noah's team twice for that, and very happy to be on the same page with him about 95% of the time, but every once in a while, he would see something that I had missed. Um, Josh had 3 U's here. I had noticed, didn't mention how many U's were in the pool. He's going to drop one of them to score a lot with the word ducky for 45. We'll keep him in the lead. And now Noah's looking at a board that's become a lot harder to bingo on, and that is what we were a bit concerned about as he was considering his last play. Um, So a very promising bingo rack. It could form a 7 like the word butane, a 7 meaning a 7-letter word. No more complicated than that. Um, does he have a bingo? Oh, he does have a bingo. Look through that T in Orgiasts. So when looking for lanes, that T in Fiat is the one you'd look at first. First of all, because it scores more, but second of all, being out in the open, you notice it more. The T in Orgiast looks pretty blocked by Ducky, but you can't assume it's blocked because it only takes 2 overlaps above it in order to fit 5 tiles beneath. Um, it's a common word. Is it the common spelling? I would say so, or at least a common spelling, common enough. I'm sure Joel has seen it, as well as some of our other expert players. I like to think Noah's going to find it. It would really charge him up to